the lead at this point for our engagement committee and our council of chapters, and we will get to a point of explaining what those are, but they basically focus on our chapters and helping provide them with the resources, the mentoring, and the structure to help them move. Those of you who are on Zoom, if you have questions, you can go into the chat box, which is on the bottom of your screen. If you take your little thing over the chat box, and you can send a chat to any or all of us. If you are not speaking, it would be nice if you put the mute on, because there gets to be a lot of background noise. We've had dogs barking and Leslie's paper shuffling and things like that. So we need to make sure that we keep noise to the reduced. Jen, is there anything else on the logistics before we get started?
I don't think so. I think that'll do it.
All right. This ECA 101 for chapters is a very high level overview, in that we're not taking the time to dive in to specifics, but we want to give an overview of ECA and what it is and its purpose, but it will not get down into specific policies or how they get developed and things like that. And then we're going to, again, in a very quick way, introduce you to our basic guidelines and tools that can help support chapters. And there's a lot there. And we're not going to walk you through every item on every PowerPoint or click every URL. But when you get the PowerPoints, you can click on the URLs on the PowerPoints and dive back in. And so with that sort of introduction, we can go to the PowerPoints. We're jumping ahead a bit. We didn't mean to throw this one at you. We'll get there. Okay, so this call is designed to be for current, future, prospective chapter leaders. It's not a commitment that you're going to form a chapter, but this is an overview. And the current chapter leaders, many of them, they know our resources and materials very well, but others, they're busy, and there may be aspects of our materials that they're not so familiar with. So let's go into the next slide. And this is just a 90,000 foot overview of what ECA is. Our focus is reaching out to elders, because elders have particular strengths in demanding action to address climate change. First of all, as elders, we have experience and wisdom, and many of us have skills that we can bring to bear on this. We're advocating for the welfare of others now and in the future. So our advocacy isn't tainted with, possible self-interest of, I'm not trying to get a promotion. I'm not trying by doing this to convince somebody that I'm worth hiring. This, when we go in front of legislators or when we talk to people, they know we're doing it out of our heart and our passion, and not out of, crass self-interest. We're really speaking on behalf of the common good. And, honestly, as I started life as an American historian, the common good, the public good, that was the central focus of our founding fathers. And we've stepped away from that. And I think elders can help bring us back. Going on to the next next slide, sorry. So this is again, 90,000 foot perspective. Greenhouse gases are the cause of climate change. There are a variety of greenhouse gases, and there are a variety of ways to deal with them, from keep it in the ground and stopping coal extraction to, draw down through a variety of ways with better farming, with forestation and things like that. So the policies that we support are policies that are aimed at slowing down and reversing climate change. Now, there are mitigation and there are adaptation policies, and we are certainly, those are things that in certain locales at certain times makes a lot of sense to pursue. And Steve, who's on this call, he is the head of our policy committee. And they are right now working with US Climate Action Network members and others. And we will be coming out with a I don't want to say a reformulation because that's not really it, but we will have some more specifics to point to as part of our policy. And now I'm going to turn it over to Jerry.
Hi, everybody. Welcome. Just to let you know, we have adopted the HEMES principles because we believe that that is a really good way to run an organization. They follow the principles of inclusion with bottom-up organizing, which I will touch on a little bit, but that is clearly indicated by the fact that we are part of a larger organization, and ECA sort of pushes up our goals and desires to the bigger organization. We have adopted the HEMES principles, and we are part of the US Climate Action Network, which is consists of over 175 climate and environmental organizations, and they really require that their constituent members adopt the HEMES principles. So we have done that, and we expect all of our chapters to do that, adopt the principles too. Next slide, please. So who are we? We are maybe elders, but we are a very young organization, launched in 2019. 2014, I'm sorry. Where Elders Action Network is the parent organization, is the 501c3 that we are a part of. It was formerly Conscious Elders Network, has changed its name this year to more accurately reflect its focus on action. And Elders Climate Action itself is not an organization, but a project of Elders Action Network. And we are responsible to them. They have a board of directors, and they develop overall large policy and visions for the organization. We're all elder volunteers. We've got 6,500 members and climate teams throughout the country, as well as many partners. Next slide. This slide needs no explanation. I'm not going to even stop here, but our voice counts. Our vote counts because we are such a huge voting bloc. So next slide. These are some policies that we advocate for. Those policies may change as conditions change on the planet, but they're designed and put forth by the policy committee. And you heard that Steve is the chair of that committee, and he has a group of science gurus that delve into the science to look at what policies are really going to make an impact. And so these are the policies that we've currently adopted that we're going to advocate for. And that doesn't mean that in the local areas that there may be kind of a different focus. These are the national priorities, but each chapter, based on its own geography, will look at policies very differently, and we'll look at what is critical in terms of climate change in their area. An example is, Jen lives in Arizona, I live in South Florida. Arizona has no interest in being highly focused on sea level rise because it's not of nature to that particular state, whereas sea level rise in Florida is a huge issue, and that would be something that we would focus on here. My house is only 7 feet above sea level, so and that's the average height of South Florida's homes. Next slide. So these are our core initiatives that we have focused on really since our inception, which are our carbon fee and dividend legislation, and that is now has become the Energy Innovation and Carbon Dividend Act. Has resurfaced and looks like it has some legs and may actually really be going somewhere this term or next term. EPA emissions regulations, clearly that's something that we focused on from the very beginning, and it's more important now. And allowing chapters to look at state and local policies and how they can act in a way that's favorable for their state, as well as fossil fuel divestment. So, and I know for some of you, this is kind of old material. Some of it is not, for some of you, it's not. We'll not spend a lot of time on it, and you'll get the slides, so you'll be able to really dig into them when you get them. What have we done? This past year, we had a webinar series, 4 webinars. We had a huge participation. It was, I would say it was our most successful event that we've ever had. The Northern California chapter of Elders Climate Action held a 1-day gathering in conjunction with the Global Climate Summit in September in San Francisco, and it was a hugely successful endeavor on their part. It's the first chapter who's, well, it's not, that's the second chapter that's had an actual event. The Arizona chapter had an event the previous year in conjunction with Citizens Climate Lobby. We've done a candidates pledge project. We participated in Elders Voting for the Climate, Letters to Loved Ones, and Elders Climate Action Day and Grandparents Climate Action Day in 2015 and 17. So, you know, these are just some highlights of what we've done. Next slide. We have some monthly events, and those consist of our monthly national call, which is on the 4th Tuesday of the month, and we have a speaker for part of that time, and then part of that time we focus on some actions that you can take as an ECA member and as an elder. And we encourage chapter members to come to the monthly calls too, because they can be informative. And then we have a monthly Climate Tea and Talk, which is a casual, informal conversation and chat that can go in any direction as it relates to climate and the environment, and those have become very successful. They are small groups, so there's always opportunity for everybody to get an opportunity to speak. If there's more people than a small group, we have multiple groups going all simultaneously. So what do we do to engage elders? We have chapters, which is an organized group, and within chapters, we may have teams or pods, which is a small group that may identify a project or may be a part of a distinct geographic location. Not part, if you have a state chapter, you may have a small group in a remote part of the state that wants to kind of be a chapter, but not fully and become a part of the chapter. We have some collaborations, which are initiatives and partnerships with other organizations. And that's an area that this year is our huge focus. How we can collaborate with other organizations to amplify their voice and amplify our voice and just make it bigger and louder and hopefully more successful. And then we have national committees, so people have an opportunity to participate in any of the ECA leadership committees. And basically, how do we engage elders? Whatever works in your own area. So it's not going to look the same everywhere. And I'm going to turn it back over to Leslie.
Thank you. Thank you. So, you know, as Jerry said, we've got the ECA National, or Elders Climate Action is under the umbrella of Elders Action Network. We're a project of Elders Action Network. And what I could call ECA National in quotations is a number of committees made up of people who volunteered, who really want to be active and take roles in those committees to help develop policy, to help focus on our collaborations, to address communications like newsletters and bulletins and Twitter and Facebook. This is the sort of structure, but it's very, you know, it's not elected officers, it's people who've stepped up, who are willing to put in the time and effort, who've got the talent. And so, you know, often we have people who are chapter leaders or members of chapters who have particular talents and interests who may well step into one of those roles. Now, as we turn to the ECA chapters themselves, I'm not going to go through this slide in any way in detail, but we have two committees that deal with chapters, and that's what I mentioned before. The Engagement Committee is a committee that provides for support, oversight, and coordination for chapters. And the idea is, in effect, that the heads of chapters participate in the Engagement Committee to deal with the bigger issues, make sure that resources are developed, and help share. The Council of Chapters, which was mentioned earlier, is a more informal grouping where members of chapters can get together on a Zoom call and share and discuss issues that they faced and see how others have dealt with similar issues, or discover a policy or a program that one chapter is working on that would work well for them. So it's a place of sharing and community. And right now, we're sort of in hiatus in that normally we have a Council of Chapters meeting every month on, I think it's the first Wednesday, and the Engagement Committee meeting on the third Wednesday. But because we're reaching out to try to have a common platform for our existing and our forming chapters and everybody on the same page, what we're doing right now is we're holding ECA 101 now. We're going to have an ECA, quote, 102. And then depending on the interest, we can have some other calls where people can come together and we can sort of address big picture issues or specific issues as there is felt need. So the steps for becoming a chapter are set out in this slide. You'll get the slide on Monday, and you can connect. But if you want to be a chapter, you apply. The application form is pretty simple. It just needs your name and address, the other people who are going to be involved with you in helping to form the chapter. There's a guide for getting started. And these are things that you can reach out to. And then if you've got questions, we can address them. We can go on to the next slide. Now, the Engagement Committee receives applications to become a chapter. And if the Engagement Committee says, great, this looks fine, it passes it up to our coordinating council. And the coordinating council is made up of a member or the leader of each of those national committees. It's sort of the place, the head, where all the ideas and all the things that are going on get brought together, and they're doing what the word is, coordinating. So the coordinating council will review the applications, and once approved, then it will make even more resources available to you. The chapter handbook, there's some sections that are confidential. Once you are in an approved chapter, you will get access to the full thing. And then there's some nice resources, logos, possibility of having a web page or a Facebook page. These are all laid out. So we can go on to the next one. And, Jerry mentioned this earlier. Every chapter is different. They're in a different geographical context. There are different local and state opportunities to address climate change. Maryland is working right now on pressing a bill that requires the Department of the Environment to do environmental survey before it approves a fracked gas pipeline. What happened is they started approving fracked gas pipelines without doing any kind of environmental review to see what would happen if the pipe cracked. Well, we're going to force them to check that, and hopefully that'll end up, along with other pressure, in preventing them from approving the pipelines at all. As Jerry said, for Florida, sea level rise is a critical issue. For others, it's drought. In the heartland, it's agricultural production and droughts and changing agricultural production to be more helpful. So when you're a chapter, this is a sort of a bullet point list of some of the things that are expected of chapters or resources for chapters. Within the chapter, follow the Hermes principles. We're open. We're not a autocracy formal bureaucracy. Yes, we can form leadership teams. We can have groups that take on responsibilities. But again, the idea is we're all working as volunteers, and we need to be respectful. And we expect our chapters to support our national campaigns. They may do it in different ways. Some may be more active and others less, but there is that central node of what ECA is. And for us to be effective, our nationally chosen campaigns that bubble up from the chapters through the committees up to the coordinating council, those need to be supported so that we can show the numbers and the success to keep growing. So now I'm going to turn it over to Jerry again.
Thanks, Leslie. So we have certain parameters that we need to express to our chapters and our teams. And then some of them are based on regulations such as IRS regulations, and some are based on some policies that we are trying to develop for either consistency or to help us move forward as an organization. So I'll go through these pretty quickly, but chapters are a part of Elders Climate Action. And Elders Climate Action is a part of Elders Action Network. Elders Action Network is the 501c3, and Elders Climate Action, and they have the board of directors, and we are basically a project or campaign of Elders Action Network. So we have our own trademarked logo as distinct from Elders Action Network, but we still are a part of them. And there's some basic things that we need. One is we have to remain nonpartisan. Before we were even a not-for-profit, the design of the organization was that it would be nonpartisan, which means not endorsing or campaigning on behalf of any candidates in any partisan campaign. Now, obviously, you may wish to campaign for candidates, and you do that as personally, not as a part of ECA. So that means in no ECA documents would we have anything supporting any candidates. We are asking that chapters have regularly scheduled meetings. A chapter really can't be a chapter if it doesn't have some kind of organizational structure. And submits a monthly chapter action report to ECA. And Jen will get into that a little bit, but I'm going to tell you why. We, as a national organization, we're always in need of funds. Our funding so far is basically donations, and we're applying for grants and to foundations for money, and we need to be able to say to them, we have X number of members, we've done X number of tabling events, we've done X number of phone calls, etc. So we need some basic data to be able to move forward and really document our credibility, both to our funders and to our members. So it's not terribly complex. Jen has made it as simple and easy as possible. But that's an expectation. And with those reports, there may be areas that you just haven't done in any particular month. That's fine. You just don't put a number to anything that you haven't done. And that's why we just kind of gave a world of options there. Any income and expenditures through chapters have to go through Elders Action Network. Elders Climate Action does not have its own bank account, and chapters do not have their own bank account. All funds go through Elders Action Network. They're tracked and audited that way. And you will, as a chapter, all chapters will have a standard naming format. So we've got, Elders Climate Action NorCal chapter, and some chapters are regional, some chapters are statewide. Ann Arbor is a very specific area, and those are all fine. And you get your own name that differentiates you, and get to use our logo as part of your chapter business. Next slide, please. So Of course, the IRS has some control over what a 501c3 does, and in order to be eligible for that as a tax-exempt organization and a nonprofit, we have some basic rules, and that means we must be nonpartisan, no political campaigns, every action we perform has to be nonpartisan, no contributions basically to any political campaigns on behalf of ECA. Education and advocacy are fabulous, but partisanship is not. And we've got to, be careful with that in our newsletters and our Facebook and our Twitter. For instance, in Twitter or Facebook, we can't promote an individual candidate, even though they may have done something fantastic for our cause. We can't say, please support this candidate. You can put out whatever they have done, but not to support a particular candidate. So I just want to touch a little bit on chapter funds, because I know some chapters may get donations. So as I said before, chapters aren't independent organizations. Elders Climate Action is not either, and everything goes through Elders Action Network. So if a chapter wants to apply for a grant, that request goes through Elders Action Network first. And Elders Action Network, the president of Elders Action Network is the person who is the only person who can actually enter into any agreements on behalf of the organization. We've got a fundraising guidance, so you can look at that. You'll have access to it for both grants and donations. And there may be administrative costs on part of Elders Action Network. They haven't charged any administrative costs for managing the funds so far, but that may not be the case moving forward. And ECA does not collect membership fees or sell merchandise, and the chapters are not able to do that at this time. That could change in the future, but as we stand right now, that is not available. So I'm going to turn it over to Jen, and let you know, before she starts, Jen has developed this chapter handbook, which is chock full of tools and resources. And as a chapter leader, you can consider it your Bible. So Jen, can you take that away?
Sure. Hi, everybody, and thanks for joining us. And it's nice to see chapter leadership and get to know all of you by face a little bit better. This is the ECA chapter handbook, and this is something that we've been developing. We developed early last year and have been sort of continuously adding to throughout the year. And it's basically a live document, a living document between Elders Climate Action, quote unquote, national, and the chapters, or the chapter leadership. And like Jerry said, it's kind of your Bible. It's meant to be a continuous and ongoing resource, not necessarily something that you would sit down and read once and put away. It's what I mean by it being a living document is that it's actually updated in live time. So when I make updates to it, you see those updates without having to open a different file. And it's interactive. So everything within the handbook actually is linked. And so there's two different ways that you can find this handbook. One is on the ECA website, and it's in the actual chapter directory section of the ECA website. So if you go to the chapters directory section, scroll down to the bottom of that page, you're going to find a little section at the bottom of that page that's resources for chapters, and an easy way to find quick links to things like chapter handbook. The other place that you can find the chapter handbook is in the Council of Chapters folder on Google Drive. And anybody who is current leadership should have access to the Council of Chapters folder on Google Drive. And within that folder is your individual chapter folders, as well as the chapter handbook. If for some reason you don't have access to the Council of Chapters folder or can't find the chapter handbook, just shoot me an email and I can help you out with that. I want to talk a little bit about the sections of the handbook, but I'm not going to go into detail or go into these different sections. I would just ask that everybody that is in the chapter leadership goes through these sections and sort of familiarizes yourselves with what's available in the handbook. And like I said, it's a place where we will continually update and we will continually change things. The first section of the handbook, I'm just going to kind of quickly go through the different sections to call your attention to the contents. So the first section is really just a basic overview of Elders Climate Action. It's the kind of thing where you're going to find the core policies and principles, and the mission, the vision statement, things like that. The core principles and policies will actually be updated here fairly soon once the policy committee is done with their revisions to the 2019 policies for ECA, which should be, I think, here in the next month or two. As well as the executive summary and the annual report are included, but this version is actually the 2017 version. We have not yet finalized the 2018 version, but once it's finalized, it will update into the handbook, and the timeline and whatnot will be updated as well. But it's a great place to get to know a little bit more about Elders Climate Action, about the values and who we are as an organization. The next major section of the handbook, and really the kind of main purpose that this handbook was created, was to sort of create a compiled location for all the business materials for your chapter. So we have a section on our website, which is the action tool in the action toolkit, which is a lot of materials for you to be able to print at home and use, or send to a print house to have printed. And so you can find links to the materials on the websites. You can find things like your chapter join form information, find out more about chapter emails and social media and t-shirts and things like all of those types of things. But it's also a place where you're going to find information on chapter fundraising. So you're going to find things like the fundraising guidance and how to document and track funds, which we have a process for. And then you're going to find information on chapter Zoom account. So the chapter has its own, or all the chapters have a shared Zoom account, so you can offer online meetings just like we're doing right now. The next section is how to build engagement in your chapter. So this is really a section that is meant to be a resource to help you figure out some new ideas or be a little bit more innovative in your thinking about how do you reach out, how do you find people, how do you engage those people and get them to come and be part of your chapter. So there's a number of different suggestions and ideas, and I'm always open to any input from any of you because you're the chapters. So if you have any input into some tools and resources to add to this handbook, please let me know. Or specifically, if you have any suggestions or tips or tools for other chapters in how to build engagement. The real purpose of this ECA 101 meeting is really to build a community within the chapters that helps the chapters succeed. And so I think one thing that is, I think, really important in establishing this community of chapters is sharing your ideas, sharing your strategies and your tactics of how you're doing things in your chapter. How are you managing information? How are you managing your people? How are you communicating? How are you getting them to engage? Those are all really great things that you all can share amongst yourselves. But you can also share with me and I can add to resources like this chapter handbook. The next section is the chapter leadership's responsibility. So a lot of that is the types of things that we've discussed here tonight, and a lot of the different resources. So it's where you can find out about the the monthly action report, and you can find links to the documents and forms and whatnot for that action report. But you can also find other things about managing finances, IRS, 501c3 guidances, and then things like how to share your chapter photos. And the last section, I bring it back to green because this goes back to how do you find support from Elders Climate Action? How do you connect with us? How do you make contact with us? So this is where you're going to find contact lists for committees and find a committee list in case you're interested in participating in committees or have members that are interested in participating with committees. Beyond that chapter handbook, we also have tools and resources that are available not only for chapters, but also for individuals or chapter members on our website. So on our website, we have a section that's the ECA Action Toolkit, and this section is actually accessible to chapter members. It's accessible to chapter leaders. It's accessible to anybody in the public. And this is where you're going to find all sorts of really great information. It's all content that we have created and that we created basically for you, for the chapters to be able to use and share. So it's where you're going to find things like our newsletter archives, the Candidates Pledge project that we did last year, the results from that project in case you're curious about it. Materials for events that you can print out or have printed, info sheets and infographics, posters and banners, presentations, social media graphics and social media information, and things like our videos and audio recordings, which are our national calls and our webinars and the special events and things that we do. And then there's a new section that is dedicated to the webinars, so quick and easy access to find those webinar videos. Now, another important area of tools and resources for chapters are found in Google Drive. And so Google Drive is essentially like, think of it like a filing cabinet in the sky. And it's where all things Elders Climate Action reside. And it's a place where Elders Climate Action can communicate directly or collaborate, I should say, directly with the chapters. And so Google Drive is where we house files, but then from there we can share those files with individuals, with you guys as the chapter, and we can do things like collaborative editing and that type of thing, which is a really important thing to Elders Climate Action.
You evidently didn't want it.
National organization that is spread throughout the country. So because we're all working from our homes, it makes things a lot easier and a lot more efficient to have this Google Drive system that allows access to important information and shared with individuals in the way that it needs to be shared. So the types of things that you're going to find within the Google Drive for the Council of Chapters folder are going to be things like the handbook and join forms and action reports, logos, those kinds of things for your individual chapters. One of the big things that we have in that section, and I'm not going to go into detail on this, this is the monthly chapter action report. This is the cheat sheet to it. And I know that when you look at this probably looks overwhelming. All this basic first step is telling you is that you're going to have to send an email to people. So it just tells you how to send an email. Essentially, we have an action report. And Shirley, if you wouldn't mind, can you mute yourself? For some reason, I'm having a hard time muting you. It's not allowing me to mute you for right.
I was muted. Let's see. Participants. Where's the
If you just hover over the video box of you should see mute.
view? All I see is your screen now. I'm not seeing me.
Then,
If you go to the very
Oh,
bottom of your screen and to the far,
okay. I think we got it figured out now. This slide basically is just telling you that that once a month you're going to need, as chapter leaders, or you're going to have to designate a member of your chapter to send an email out to your chapter members. And when you send that email out, you will be sending them a request for them to complete their individual action report for as a chapter member, of a member of your chapter. So there's a couple of items here that you see circled, and that is the things in yellow are things that you would need to actually alter, or I can help you alter. That's just putting in your chapter name and then entering the link or the URL to the report that your chapter members for your specific chapter would be completing. So each chapter would be sending this out to their own membership, and then that member would hopefully click on the link and complete the action report as a member. You'll also see at the top of that box that I've circled BCC and wrote in insert email addresses on BCC line. And that's to remind us all that anytime we're emailing from the ECA email list or from our chapter email list, that one, we should be using an ECA email address, not our personal email addresses, but an ECA email address, identifying ourselves as Elders Climate Action. And then also using the blind carbon copy line, the BCC line. And that is important because that protects people's privacy. That by using blind carbon copy, individuals, when they receive the email, they're only going to see the email address to themselves. They're not going to see the entire list. And so we want to protect our members' privacy, and your privacy is part of that as our members. And so please use the BCC email or BCC line when you're emailing to people, especially in these mass emails. You know, if you're communicating with an individual, you don't have to worry about that type of thing. Once they've completed this, you know, once you've sent that email, then you know, a week or two later, someone from your chapter or someone from the leadership of your chapter, so yourself or a designee, is going to go to that report, which is found in your own chapter's folder. So you're going to go to the counselor chapters folder. You're going to click on your chapter folder, or you can also do this through quick links in the handbook or through this presentation. And you're going to check the results of your chapter's responses. And then the last step is that you're going to tally those responses. They're all basically numeric tallies. You're going to tally those responses, and you're going to cut and paste or drop that information into the chapter's monthly action report. And that chapter monthly action report is how we at ECA get that information from your chapter, get that data. And then that data, again, like Jerry said, is super important to us. It's, you know, being able to have some measurements of our impact, being able to go to our funders with data, with quantitative data. All of these things are really important for us moving forward. We don't really know what our individual chapters are doing unless, and especially what our chapter members are doing, unless you guys help us gather that information. And that's really, really important to us. So, so I know that these 3 slides sort of make things look complicated, but I promise you, I try to find the simplest process for your reporting. I've looked at a number of organizations' reporting processes, and I'll tell you that ours is one of the simplest. And you know, it helps when people start documenting what they're doing. I think it helps inspire us to go out and do more. Also, like Jerry said, if there's areas of the report that are blank or you don't have any data for, don't worry about it. There's no pressure to that at all. We just simply are trying to gather data to know what our constituents are out there doing. And it's by no means in any form of report card. We call it a report just because we're collecting data, but it does not change our value of you or your work or your chapter's work in any way. We just want to be able to cheerlead for you a little bit better. One last thing I just want to mention is that Elders Climate Action is on social media. So as the quote unquote national organization, we are on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, as well as LinkedIn. I just keep forgetting to put that link in here. And then our chapters are also on Facebook. So Ann Arbor has a Facebook page, Arizona, NorCal, and Massachusetts chapters all have Facebook pages. Some of y'all aren't really using your Facebook pages, a huge amount, but others are. Massachusetts, I know, has over 600 Facebook followers, and Ann Arbor, you're somewhere over 100, 150, I think, Facebook users. So that's, Facebook can be a really great way to reach out to people. If you want to set up a Facebook account and people within your sort of active chapter are going to an event or going to a rally or a march or whatever, you can post to Facebook and say, I'm going here, I'll be here at this time, at this place, and join me, and see if you get new participation, see if you get new people showing up. It's a really great way to also engage about really more localized issues. So the things that actually are directly affecting your community, especially if you're like the Ann Arbor chapter, if there are things really specific to Ann Arbor, Facebook is a really great way to get information out there and share. So I encourage you, if you don't have social media, I encourage you to join social media. And if you're not following Elders Climate Action on social media, please do. We are very active on Facebook and Twitter. We have a team of volunteers that are taking to social media regularly, and they post really valuable information. So great information to share with your members of your chapters. So I think that's it for me. I'm going to bring it back to Leslie.
Yes. Now, let me just say that the resources that we've been talking about were all developed out of the experiences and needs of our chapters to date. And as we form new chapters, we face new opportunities and new challenges, and that triggers the need to build new resources or add to or amend our existing resources. So just as Jen said that the chapter handbook is a live handbook, we very much depend on you to let us know where there are gaps, where there's confusion, where there's something that you would like to see there. Now, I'm going to correct this slide because we got notice that a number of people could not make the January 30th. And so we're going to shift our next call, and I hope most of you can make it, to February 5th at 7 p.m. And if you can't make this the February 5th at 7 p.m., we'll certainly be recording it, but we could schedule another one. But the purpose of that call is really, now we've been doing the dump, big picture. Look at the handbook, go through the materials, identify the places where you've got questions, either because as you form a chapter, you need to be able to provide answers to future members, or you've tried something and you just can't figure it out. Because if we can get that feedback from you, then we can use at least part of the call on February 5th. Jen can run us through and show us and do demos. And this is sort of how we come together to make sure we're all on the same page and that we have all the pages that we need. So I know that I have reached out to solicit comments from some of you, and I am certainly inviting any of you to send me, Leslie Wharton, Leslie W. at eldersclimateaction.org, any questions or issues that you would like to address in the upcoming call. Let me also say that if you are not a member of the Council of Chapters, or if you have members of your existing or growing chapter that would like to be part of that group of sharing, let me know so we can get you on the distribution list, because there's a Council of Chapters email distribution list, and we can make that as open as possible. Now, you know, there's a limit. You know, I don't think we want 75 or 100 people on to be able to have meaningful conversations and back and forth. But at this point, it's wide open. Jerry?
Sure, thank you, Leslie, and thank you, Jen. So we're elders, we've got passion, we've got wisdom, we've got experience, and we can do this. So, and we will do this for future generations and for all of our grandchildren. So we're gonna close this slideshow here and open it back up to questions. And if,
Yeah?
Oh, everybody disappeared. I'm sorry. So if anybody has questions, raise your hand and you can unmute, and we'll take a few questions before we end, and then the rest of them we will talk about in future meetings or email them. So questions, comments, input, anything. Steve.
Yeah, first of all, thanks a lot, Jerry, Leslie, and Jen. That was a very comprehensive look and a good review for me. My question is how to get a good launch started. And I'm sitting here in the heartland, and there's a few people in the area that are ECA members, but not a lot. There's a few in and around my state and borderline next door, and in Ohio and Southern Illinois. And if I wanted to stretch, I could get up into Chicago, but I need to like send a letter of interest out, maybe with the slide deck, to see who would want to get engaged in a chapter, because I'd like to see one in the Heartland that would compete with the Heartland Institute, which I don't know if you follow them, but they're very pro pollution and oil and gas and all that. But so the question I have, I need to do something about that. And I don't particularly, I'm on four committees now with US Can, and I'm busy with them, and we're working hard to get a new set of policies. And let me comment on that for a second too, because all the basics that we put up on that first slide, none of those are changing. Those are real. What we will have is details underneath those, okay, covering many sectors. And guys like Bob Yunke is, you know, I mean, he's taken over transportation. He's going down to real weeds in this in a second. So my interest is how do we get one started so I can maybe help it, but I don't want to particularly be the chair of it. And I think, Jerry, you've mentioned that in your own situation too, with how busy you are. Mm-hmm. So that's my question. It's a general question.
Well, I have one reaction is we have Jen's redoing our ECA 101, not for chapter leaders, but just a basic introduction to ECA. And we're going to be, or I'm going to be doing, or Jen and I were going to be doing some ECA 101s where we can send out to our membership in certain areas, like we're all going to do it for Massachusetts. We can do it for the Heartland. We can do 2 or 3 of these worldwide. But the idea is that this would be an opportunity to get people to check us out. And right. We could put notice in the newsletter. We could put bulletins out. We can put it on the Facebook page, and we can decide. I know that is, Jen didn't mention it specifically, but when you went through the handbook, there was a place that said how to connect with ECA members who are within your state or region. We can't hand over those names and email addresses directly, but what we can do is send a message to them, basically telling them, hey, you know, we've got interest in forming a Heartland chapter or a South Carolina chapter, or, you know, somebody in the Michigan recyclers of organic material are going to be expanding their focus. And we can set this up so it's a forum where people can get on, they can hear about ECA, there can be conversation. We can set up some climate tea and talk type formats. And that's one way. I mean, that's one way when you're distributed. Shirley may have some ideas. I don't know if she's still on, because she formed NorCal. There she is, because she formed NorCal. You know, they're so distributed around the Bay Area, et cetera, they can't get together.
Yeah, I expect.
Well, you know how spread out we are, Steve. You've traveled in the Northern California region, I believe. And but so far, the Zoom meetings are working. We're continuing to expand. We are going to have a face-to-face meeting, our very first, in March, which I'm very excited about. But I don't know what the magic is. I really don't. It just seems like we gather members one by one. It hasn't been, you know, this huge onslaught of people, but we continue to expand, and we still have only 6 on our leadership team. We'd love to have more, and I think we will. I think there are some people that we're going to be asking to join the leadership team. And
More than you and Marilyn and Sheila.
there are 6 of us. The mighty 6.
No, I know I have access to like the list of, or I've seen it, or Jen sent it to me, of people in our area or members that we have in emails. But I just I don't want to do that myself. I want to kind of make sure we work it through you, Leslie and Jen and Jerry, and send out maybe this slide deck and say, hey, look, you know, there's enough of us in this area, I'll call it the Heartland District, Midwest, that are members, and I think that there's about 100, quite frankly. And I want to see who's interested in actually getting engaged in a chapter. That's
you
really
know,
the first
Steve,
step to me.
I think it would be more effective if you put your name to it.
I don't mind doing that. No, I would say I'm here to be a leader, but not the leader. You know, eventually.
Well, we don't. You know, our 6 people are equal. I mean, we don't.
Yeah, that's what I'm looking for, quite frankly, is a group.
So we also have, like, there's some other options out there, and one is engaging with other organizations like CCL, and, you know, like trying to find the elders in some other organizations. Climate Reality now has Climate Reality chapters, and that's got some elders in it. So I think there's opportunities in that respect. And the other thing is that we are very fortunate that Grady now has carved out the time to spend on mentoring individually chapter leaders, chapters in formation. And I don't know if you want to talk about that a little bit, Grady, but that would be just one-on-one, you know, bouncing around some ideas. And this has worked in Massachusetts. Well, that wouldn't work in agricultural Indiana, but maybe this would work, you know, just kind of providing some sort of brainstorming, mutual brainstorming, and some mentoring based on experience. You want to talk about it a little, Grady? You are muted.
I can unmute you, Grady. Okay, you're unmuted now.
Yeah, thanks. Well, yeah, I'll just comment briefly. I've my professional work before I got engaged in climate change was that of a leadership coach and consultant. So I had some considerable experience at being just a sounding board or coach for people, and I combined making that available with just my experience founding and leading the chapter in Massachusetts. I'm sure that the conditions here are unique, and my experience is not generalizable in every way. But I think that that experience, plus having, along with Leslie, participated in the engagement committee for several years now, and interacted with others as they started and led chapters, I'd be able to draw upon a fair amount of experience. So I'd just love to be available to talk if somebody would find that helpful in thinking through how to take first steps.
There any other comments, questions, anything anybody wants to say? I'm going to put Grady's email in the chat box in case you don't have it. And you can, is that okay, Grady?
Sure.
And I want to say for all of us that we owe a lot to Jen, who is our director of operations. She's a paid consultant. She works 30 hours a week, which is all we can afford at this point. She handles everything. And so we need to be respectful of the fact that she's managing websites, she's managing meetings, she's managing notes, she's managing the info at Elders Climate Action. And be careful that we don't treat her as, you know, just our personal, oh, I need this, do it for me, because she is our only operational resource, and she's got central things that are important. Now, you may have issues you need to address and you can't figure it out, and Jen might be the person you reach out to say, Jen, I need to figure out how to do this, or can somebody else help me, or email me. I'm going to be back at work on Monday, so my time will be limited. But the point is that we all are working together, and we're all volunteers, and it isn't always easy. It isn't always just, you know, like going into the corporate headquarters and saying, I need X, Y, and Z right away, and thank you for getting that to me. And by the way, we are a team, and it's a lot of fun. And we have made enormous progress over the last 2 years on the slimmest of budgets, and with just the dedication and passion of our leadership, our chapter leaders, our chapter members. So I want to give a thumbs up to all of you.
Thank you. Thank you. Anybody else? John, I know you had some questions. Did we answer some of your questions?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
I have another one though.
Okay, go ahead.
In terms of resources, you've included banners. I presume that you don't really have a box of banners sitting in your office, Jen, that you send out to a chapter?
We do not have a box of banners, but we do have some banners, some designed banners. So if you're wanting to do a banner, your chapter would have to pay for the banner, but we can provide the artwork for that. Okay,
how do we pay for it if we can't raise any money?
You can raise funds within your chapter for chapter specific projects or chapter specific needs. So you could raise money within your chapter to buy for the purchase of a banner, something like that.
I think you need to keep track of it, and, you know, small amounts, you know, no more than $50, $100 in your account, so to speak. But I mean, for the Maryland chapter, I mean, I went and I just made all kinds of copies of our rack card, and, you know, I just absorbed the cost myself. It was like, okay, this is what it takes, and I'll do it.
I have a question then. Can a chapter charge dues for the chapter? No. Okay.
No dues.
Only contributions, right?
Contributions, yeah. And you can
But they
have,
don't go to the chapter, they go to EAC or
Yeah.
Elders Action Network. If like Massachusetts has collected donations specifically designated for their chapter, and those
Right.
donations go to Elders Action Network, they're tagged for Massachusetts.
Gotcha.
Massachusetts is, when they've
Okay.
they need something, they purchase it, and it takes it out of those funds.
Okay, I get it.
And then, you can read the chapter funding guidance, but you can have up to $50 in like petty cash that you collect, but that doesn't go through EAN, but that needs to be documented. It needs to be tracked as a revenue. It needs to be tracked as an expense and receipted both ways. It's not a tax deductible donation, but you still need to have keep your own book on that particular amount of money. Anything above that goes to EAN. And then if if somebody says, I'm going to donate $100 for the South Carolina chapter, they would send it or do it online to EAN and designate it for you. And then when you wanted to purchase the banner, those funds would come out of that, and you would coordinate with Jen on that.
Yeah.
Make sense? All right. If there's I'm sure there's more questions. Joe, I don't know if you have questions, but if you don't and you have questions later, join us on the 5th, and we'll have a robust discussion about questions, or you may say, well, why are you doing that? It doesn't make any sense. And we can we'll look at things. We don't have to. This isn't we've done things the best that we can with the resources that we have. So I'd like to thank you all and have a great weekend, and see you guys all on the 5th.